And I think attached to that, there's been a lot of analysis of how these first round quarterbacks that get drafted aren't working out too often. CJ Stroud is a big exception. And you're seeing a rate of success when a team will make the biggest investment that it can, and that's drafting a first round quarterback, and it's succeeding maybe between 25 to 35% of the time. That's a crazy fail rate. And I think what people might not understand is that the game has changed. And so maybe this is happening because teams don't know what they're doing when they select a quarterback. Sure. But what's also happening is in the background, with nobody noticing, the game has been switched from all pro to all Madden, and the difficulty level has been ratcheted up. And so these quarterbacks, these rookie quarterbacks, are getting thrown into a situation that's maybe harder than quarterbacks were thrown into a decade ago.
Yeah, well, I absolutely agree with you. And it's part of like what's going on the youth levels and into high school, into college, where quarterbacks now are being asked to do something a little bit different. It's a lot more of the 7-on-7. It's a lot more wide open type of a game. And then they get into the NFL and these defenses are playing too high. They've got a lot of good secondary guys. They've got a much better pass rush. And these quarterbacks are seeing something that they weren't accustomed to seeing as they were developing younger on. And Tom Brady even came out, I think it was yesterday or the day before that, on a podcast talking about how he wishes quarterbacks were not thrust out there right away, in the first game. He wishes that there was more time for them to develop, and how much he benefited from that, and how he benefited from, he called it like the program at Michigan. And, it was what he learned there and the program and how it taught him protection schemes and alignments, and as opposed to just calling plays, he was learning about what was expected out of him and being coached on that. And then when he got to the NFL, he had time to develop with some great coaching as well in that first year before he had to do anything. And, now quarterbacks aren't given the benefit of that as they, we'll see what happens. We're really in the infancy stages of the NIL era and, quarterbacks jumping from team to team, but they're certainly not being indoctrinated into like a program. They don't have the time for that. And then they're getting to the NFL and they're being asked to start, within the first few games for the most part. So I'm not necessarily advocating that you let your quarterback sit. There is something to be said for getting that experience because you only have that rookie deal which presents such a market inefficiency from a salary perspective to give a team an advantage. And if you burn that first year by not letting your quarterback get enough development in game action so that you can not only let him deal with some things and improve, but also coach him up in the film room about what he's seeing and what he's doing out there to set a high enough floor for year two, then you're going to you've burned that year and now you don't have as many years at that really cheap salary for him, which we've seen a lot of teams around the league be able to, they get a young quarterback and then they build up that roster really quickly in that second, third year. And all of a sudden they're a competitor. And, we've seen that with Brock Purdy and the San Francisco 49ers. Every single year, there's teams that are capable of doing that. Now, they had a great team prior to that, but his cheap salary definitely did not hurt anything for them. So I don't disagree at all. Some of these young guys are not working out. I think the NFL is very different than what it once was, but more so the youth levels and college just aren't getting them quite as prepared for what they're experiencing when they get to the NFL. And so it's really on the coaches in the NFL to have a great ability to get a guy very comfortable. You cannot bring a guy in there. It's almost like the argument for Jacoby Brissett and Drake May in New England, right? Like we know Jacoby Brissett is a journeyman quarterback who does not have the highest upside in New England, and you do not want to start him the full season. But with the state of the health of their tackles on the offensive line for the New England Patriots and the frequency that Drake May is likely to get destroyed behind center because he doesn't have all the protections down and he doesn't know the adjustments and he's not as proficient audibling at the line of scrimmage. And we said earlier, controlling that pressure like a Jacoby Brissett might be. Like, do you want to shell shock him by throwing him in there, even though he might give you the best upside week one, and risk him getting sacked too much, injured, setting his overall growth back? I would say what we want out of that Jacoby Brissett, Drake May situation is we want Drake May to start his second season at the highest floor possible. And so it's on that coaching staff to figure out when the right time is to get him into the starting lineup. But I definitely do not think it would be week one, and we'll see. I mean, Gerard Mayer has now said that it's like open competition, could be like 50-50. And I certainly have bet against that. I think Jacoby Brissett will be the week one starter, but hopefully I'm not proven wrong. We'll see.
Well, that seems to be more sensible, and people maybe should take a lesson from what's worked out with the Packers, who either by strategy or happenstance have done this apprenticeship model where the guy learns under the main guy for a while before being thrown out there. Jordan Love had been thrown out there a couple years ago, and we know that this last season, it was really bad for the first half of the season, but they and he were able to turn it around. Could it have possibly been turned around if that had occurred 2 seasons prior? Or would they just think this guy is a bust and the whole thing goes horribly, and then they're back on the carousel trying to find a new quarterback? So there does seem to be some validity in the idea that you got to bring these guys along slowly and not just throw them to the wolves. Now,